Thank you so much, Commissioner Anthony, and thank you, you and Elliot, for working with us and inviting us here today, and just a big thank you to all the members of this working group that are taking the time out of their busy schedules to hear us on this important topic. So we're here today to talk about PBR and Totex in the context of driving efficient IT investments by utilities. We think this is an important topic, especially with the emergence of cloud platforms at utilities that sort of trying to cure for some of the disincentives that are presented by traditional cost of service rate making approaches for cloud solutions. So first, just a quick intro to myself. My name is Rajiv Shah. I'm the head of North American Policy and Markets for the Octopus Energy Group. In my current capacity, I'm kind of trying to help grow our market presence through regulatory engagement across a number of different verticals that Octopus Energy Group is involved in, and that you'll hear a little bit about further along in the presentation. I joined just over a year ago. My anniversary was actually on Halloween, and came from New York State service position, most recently where I served as counsel for energy, environment, and agriculture to the governor, overseeing legal, policy, legislative, and sort of regulatory issues for 15 state agencies. Let me turn it over to my colleague, Rachel, to give you guys her quick intro.
Yeah, hello everyone, and just echo Rajiv's thanks to you, Commissioner Anthony, and the group for inviting us along today. I'm the Director for Regulation and Economics in the Octopus Energy Group. However, I have spent most of my career as a regulator, so 15 years in mainly in energy, but also water regulation, including as the chief exec of the water regulator here for a few years before joining Octopus 2.5 years ago. So really looking forward to the discussion. I suggest, Rajiv, unless you think otherwise, that maybe if we can run through our presentation, we'll try and do that fairly snappily. And then we'll take Q&A at the end, just to make sure we actually get the material across, if that's okay for everyone.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. I will try to be as speedy as I can. I sometimes get verbose, but let me just walk you through a quick agenda. So what we're trying to do here today is present sort of PBR and Totex in action by focusing in on our software system, enterprise software system in Kraken, and examining how UK PBR and Totex sort of influenced or impacted UK utilities' decision to re-platform onto Kraken. And so I'm going to kick it off with an intro to Kraken. Rachel's going to kind of take you through that UK case study. And then I'm going to come back in and try to apply some of the UK principles and just sort of some of the broader PBR mechanisms that this group has been talking about to this topic of driving more efficient IT investments for US utilities. And we certainly do want to leave plenty of time for a healthy Q&A at the end. So without further ado, let me give you a quick intro to Kraken. Kraken is a part of the Octopus Energy Group. It's a company that was founded in 2016 with a mission to bring clean, affordable energy to the masses. We have many tentacles, and I think I overuse this tentacle phraseology, so I'll try not to in this presentation, but you can really group them into 4 distinct verticals or buckets. We're a retail energy business serving 8 million customers around the world. In just 7 years, we've become the 2nd largest retail supply business in the UK's fully deregulated retail market. We're now in 8 countries, including here in Texas. And we've developed a reputation for being leaders in customer service and driving demand-side flexibility, particularly in the sort of underutilized residential and small business segment. We're an energy services company, so we are leasing EVs. We are manufacturing heat pumps as of a few months ago. We are installing DERs in people's homes, everything from solar to heat pumps to batteries to electric vehicle chargers to smart thermostats. And we're also installing smart meters in people's homes as well, because that's something that is delegated to retailers to do in the UK. We have a generation arm that is managing $7 billion in renewable investments, mostly concentrated in the UK and Western Europe, but I'm happy to say we're standing up some of our first investments in North America currently. And then we have Kraken. Kraken is sort of the glue that stitches this all together. The company was actually founded by tech-centric individuals that didn't necessarily have decades of experience purely in the energy sector, but they had worked very closely with utilities and energy companies in deploying enterprise tech solutions in their landscape, and sort of observed that the systems, the status quo of utility enterprise IT was ill-suited for the energy system as currently configured, and particularly ill-suited to where the energy system is going, to this decentralized group of resources increasingly powered by renewable assets. And so what is Kraken? It's this end-to-end platform with 3 different distinct modules. First, you have the customer side of it, everything that is in the meter to cash, if you will, IT system, CIS and billing, meter data management, customer relationship management. That's integrated with a flexibility platform that is enabling asset management and control and optimization of everything from behind the meter DERs to grid scale front of the meter assets like batteries and generation. And lastly, we recently developed a field services capability. This spurred from Octopus Energy as a retailer's need to manage field deployments of technicians and crews that are managing our smart meters, and is evolving with sort of the field services needs of our customers and clients worldwide. What's different about this platform from enterprise platforms writ large that you have traditionally seen deployed at utilities is that it's sort of comprehensive and all in one place. It's a single coding stack, not sort of stitching together of various disparate systems by an enterprise backend that sits over a single data lake, so you don't have tens or dozens of different databases that are being put together. We're serving utilities in electricity, gas, water, wastewater, and fiber with this technology. And it's proven out. As the slide before depicted, 50 million plus customers across the world. We've had over 40 successful migrations. And by successful, I mean on time and at cost. And in under half of the time that traditional system migrations take. So 2 years or less compared to 4 to 6 years, which is sort of the status quo. And we are taking a continuous improvement and continuous development approach to sort of iterating on the system, where with traditional systems, you might be putting out software patches every 6 months with thousands upon thousands of changes. We're kind of incrementally evolving our system day by day with hundreds of incremental changes that are being deployed. What this allows us to do is both de-risk those updates for our utility clients, but also implement change faster and cheaper than is traditionally sort of experienced. When I was in New York, I got frustrated with the timeframes that utilities would take to implement let's say, a managed EV charging program that we were interested in seeing them implement, and the costs associated with that. Well, rather than many months and years, we've been able to kind of deliver new rates and products to our customers in a matter of weeks or a few months with Kraken. Just I'll quickly take you through a bit of around the Kraken ethos and outcomes. Our approach is to take this tech and enable utilities to have a really modern set of tools to serve the new energy companies, or customer rather. And it's all driven towards, really important outcomes from our perspective. We want to reduce O&M spending. So because our customer service agents that are utilizing Kraken have all the information in one place, they're able to serve sort of any issue that a customer could be coming in to and presenting them with. It allows customer service operations at utilities to basically break down the traditional siloed approach between things like collections, billing, program support, etc., and have a universal agent model. That in turn results in happier customers and a happier customer service team. I spoke to sort of the de-risked migration and the faster migration capabilities earlier, and the agility that this affords the utility from an organizational perspective. And one of the key end results here is by leveraging that asset management capability and sort of merging it with this capability to deliver new products on the customer bill, is that we've been able to spur really unprecedented demand flexibility from the residential and small business segment. You don't have to take my word for it. The industry is sort of recognizing Kraken as we move along, for not just its remarkable growth, but these capabilities to drive innovation. So that's just a quick intro to give you some context as I hand it over to Rachel to take you through the case study in the UK.
Great, thanks, Rajiv. Okay, so the case study we're going to look at today is actually a water case study. If you just go on to the next slide, Rajiv. I mean, it just so happens, we'll talk about it, but we've had a very big water utility here in the UK recently sign a license with Kraken. So it's the obvious case study to bring, but actually, I think the more we look at it, the more the parallels are with much of the utility structure in the US actually sit more with our water sector here in Britain than our energy sector. So water still remains virtually integrated, from water production, treatment, waste disposal, distribution, and the consumer retail side of things. Whereas in energy, as you're probably aware, our utilities are exclusively the transmission and distribution networks. And we have competitive markets for retail and wholesale, much as you have in the US. So if you move on to the next slide, Rajiv. I mean, one of the very big water utilities in Britain very recently signed a 10-year licensing deal for Kraken, for the platform that Rajiv has just given you an overview of. And I mean, the interesting thing is that they signed about 6 weeks ago now, right in the middle of a price control review process. So ahead of any kind of regulatory allowed revenues or allowed returns having been set for the next period, which begins in April 2025. And they were able to go ahead and make this commercial decision without any kind of regulatory approval whatsoever. And so really what I want to explore is what is it in the regulatory regime that made this commercial decision both possible and attractive for the company concerned. And in a nutshell, there are kind of three elements, I think, to the regulatory framework that we have for water. The first is, a huge number actually of performance incentive mechanisms, and a big focus on performance incentive mechanisms in the regulatory deal that is done every 5 years. Secondly is, as you have presaged, the Totex rate-making approach as well, which is embedded in the regime. And finally, a predictable multi-year approach, incentive-based approach from the regulator. Worth just saying that a licensing deal with Kraken is a 10-year deal. So, the company has sufficient visibility of what the regulatory framework is going to be in 10 years' time. So I'm just going to dig into each of those a little bit, but just before I do, just to kind of give you a bit of a visualization, 5-yearly price control cycles, with the next one starting in April 2025. We're just at the point, in fact, Severn Trent signed the license agreement just before they submitted their business plan for the 5-year period beginning in April 25. And that's relevant because that business plan now will be predicated to some extent on some of the improvements that they are hoping Kraken will bring for them. And the rate making process, the price control review process, as we call it here, is looking both at allowed revenues, allowed return, but also involves setting the performance commitments, many of which have got financial incentives associated with them. So if we just move on to the next slide, Rajiv, then just dive into those performance incentive mechanisms a little bit more. I actually can't remember how many performance incentive mechanisms Severn Trent currently has in its price control, but it will run to 20 or 30. So there's quite an involved, granular approach of thinking about what outcomes does the regulator want to reward the company for achieving? Looking at different aspects of its business. So it's clean water business, it's wastewater business, it's customer retail business, and thinking about improvements they might want for the environment. So there's big focus on reducing pollution, for example. What improvements do they want for customers? So a big focus on customer satisfaction and complaint handling, and of course the basics like how often is water supply interrupted, and how much leakage is there, which is a very kind of hot topic here in the UK. So a large number of different performance incentive mechanisms, each with their own target and each with their own calibration of reward or penalty for achieving or failing to achieve those targets. Now, if you look at Severn Trent's annual performance report, and the link is there, you'll see that earlier this year, the year that's just finished, Severn Trent met 79% of their performance incentive mechanisms. So they are one of the best performing companies in Britain. And in that year alone, that was giving them a £27 million reward. Just to kind of put that in perspective, I mean, Severn Trent's base base allowed return on equity in its price control is 3.9%, and if they do really well under their performance incentive mechanism arrangements, they could increase that return by 1.9 percentage points. So quite a big delta upside on the base allowance that's baked into the regulatory settlement. And if they do terribly, they could wipe 2.8 basis points off that central base allowance or return of 3.9%. So beginning to see these performance incentive mechanisms, looking at them in terms of pounds million doesn't really make any sense, but for what it does to their ability to increase their returns on equity invested is quite significant. If we move to the next one, the second aspect of the regime that we think has been really helpful here in getting Severn Trent to look seriously at replatforming is the Totex rate making approach. And this has been a feature actually of British energy regulation for over a decade now, and water was probably about 5 years or so behind that. So it's certainly been in place now, I would say, for nearly 10 years in water. And just very simply, what that means is that a regulator really makes no distinction in its treatment of Capex and Opex for the purposes of rate making. It sets a Totex revenue allowance covering both Capex and Opex expenditure. And then fundamentally, when it comes to actually conducting the price control review process, one of the things that is discussed is how much of that overall Totex bucket is recovered through what I always think of as fast money, i.e., through prices in the price control period directly, and how much is capitalized and put into the regulatory asset base and then recovered through rate of return and depreciation. And just to give you a sense, in Severn Trent's case, for example, the capitalized amount is just a little bit over 40% of the overall Totex basket. But of course, what that Totex approach does is it means that effectively there's no disincentive on Severn Trent from making operational expenditure or license fee, a license expenditure decision if it thinks that is the best way to drive its business forward and to do well in achieving efficiency or achieving the performance standards that the regulator has set it. The other aspect here as well is that if companies outperform on their overall Totex allowance, then they can keep a proportion of that outperformance, and equally they are protected on the downside. So if they underperform, some of that is actually passed on to customers. And again, one of the points of analysis and negotiation during the price control setting process is actually how much does the company get to keep, or how much is it exposed. And in Severn Trent's case, they are actually allowed to keep 50% of the upside. That was a generous allowance on behalf of the regulator because Severn Trent had actually put in a very good business plan for the last price control review that allowed and helped Ofwat rather to get a better deal across the industry as a whole. So that's the second element. And then the third element, moving on, was the fact that there's enough predictability of the regulatory regime that a company can make a 10-year license deal. So, Ofwat has had this kind of performance and incentive-based framework now. It will be probably going into its third iteration of this. Obviously, the performance incentive mechanisms themselves might vary a little bit from one 5-year period to the next. New focuses emerge as a much higher focus now on pollution and what that does to the quality of rivers, for example, than there was a decade ago in water regulation. And the strength of those incentives might vary a little bit as well from one 5-year period to the other, but there's enough certainty about the rules of the game for these kind of longer term deals to be struck. So moving on, Rajiv, to the next slide. So just kind of summing up on one slide, I mean, I think, you know, when you look at the current regulatory framework for water, you can see that actually replatforming to a kind of you know, best-in-class tech platform like we believe we offer through Kraken, you know, it makes sense for a company if it is facing really strong financial incentives to improve its operational performance. Whether that be customer service, whether that be fixing and finding leaks quickly, or whatever. They've got a very strong incentive to improve their efficiency and outbeat the regulatory allowance, with some of that being allowed to keep. And indeed, you know, if Severn Trent have been clever and woven Kraken into the business plan they have in front of Ofwat right now, they are probably increasing their chances yet again of being seen as a leading company by Ofwat, and therefore perhaps you know, getting a higher sharing factor and getting some other rewards for being seen as a kind of frontier company. Clearly, it kind of goes almost without saying that the company is making a bet that could backfire, right? So their ability to get the upsides of Kraken is, you know, partly down to them and how well they use it, and clearly they may find that they've entered into a licensing deal that actually impedes their overall efficiency and just adds cost that isn't paid back in terms of improved efficiency or improved performance, and in which case, you know, that will hit their bottom line because of the way that the overall regulatory framework works. So I think that was all I was going to say, and I think, Rajiv, you wanted to just kind of maybe quickly apply some of these principles to the US.
Yeah, so I mean, we know, you know, very well that you all heard from the excellent folks over at RMI on sort of Totex more conceptually. And so here I'm going to try to apply some of the principles that Rachel's discussed, and more broadly, some of the PBR mechanisms that, you know, this group has been discussing in the context of IT investment by US utilities. So we know there's a spectrum here, and I would say sort of most, if not all, utilities and jurisdictions in the US are somewhere in the middle between sort of the traditional approach and what I would submit is sort of a fully transformed market approach. And so what I'm trying to do with this series of slides is really kind of pick and choose from various PBR mechanisms in the context of this cloud versus on-premises IT dilemma that's really important to us as a company, and that we think should be, you know, important to address from a regulatory perspective. And first, I just want to kind of give a little bit of background about sort of cloud platforms and some of the value that they can potentially provide for utilities. They're cost effective. We've talked a lot about sort of the O&M savings and operational efficiencies that our platform can drive, but more broadly, they can open up capacity within the utility so it can be focused on its core mission in the provision of energy service. They're agile. They can be sort of scaled in deployment, and costs can be sort of more efficient through that scalability. And as I mentioned before, you can more sort of rapidly implement changes to these systems. In the early days of cloud computing, cybersecurity was a big concern, not just amongst utilities, but across other industries. And I think that largely that debate is, diminished over time, and especially with the emergence of some of the larger cloud hosting providers like AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google. These companies have really amazing security teams and are adopting some of the most extensive security protocols and approaches. And I think that's reflected in the fact that you're seeing the defense sector and banking industry increasingly moving into the cloud, not just for some of their peripheral systems, but for some of their core IT platforms. And lastly, this is definitely woven into what we spoke to you earlier about Kraken, but cloud services are more capable of evolving and innovating. They're better suited to connecting and managing DERs and sort of the smart grid of the future. So I want to just go into a little bit of background. The folks over at Advanced Energy United and EEI last year put out a white paper called Reaching for the Cloud that really focused on the question of parity between cloud and on-premises solutions. And they sought to sort of address the Capex bias towards on-premise and point out how after changes to the GAAP accounting principle that were adopted in 2018, you can actually capitalize quite a bit of the cloud system and sort of level that playing field. But and some jurisdictions have moved that way. I think most utilities have deployed some sort of cloud system, often at the edges with something like a DERM system. But it still presents a dilemma when we're talking about larger systems. So where a cloud solution, even if you can capitalize it, is ultimately cheaper, you're still faced with this spend more to earn more dynamic, where the utility is disincentivized from going with the cloud platform if it's ultimately going to be cheaper under traditional cost of service rate making approaches. And in the absence of capitalization, where the cloud solution is going to be more expensive but have sort of better functionality, we need to figure out a way to level the playing field. And we think the solution therein is to reward better performance. So on this slide, we're trying to sort of depict a suite of different options or mechanisms for kind of leveling that playing field and driving, more outcome focused and efficient utility decisions for cloud IT. And on the right-hand side, the color bars are meant to reflect level of change or magnitude of effort involved with each of these. And so let me take you through sort of these, in due course. The first, we believe, if we want to establish parity, the easiest thing to do is open the door for cloud solutions. And that could happen by allowing them to be capitalized as AEU and EEI detailed. What that would do is eliminate the bias towards on-prem and really unlock our ability to compete on a more level playing field. But the limitation there is that you're still faced with that same incentive to spend more in order to earn more. So then if we're worried about sort of that dynamic, you could bring in sort of a shared savings or earnings adjustment mechanism or modified clawback mechanism that incentivizes cost containment, both on the CapEx and the OpEx side. But there, the limitation is that you could be sacrificing performance in order to seek the maximum profit derived from that savings incentive. And that's where I think sort of PIMs could come in, and you're sort of incentivizing the utility to perform and drive outcomes that are aligned with what the commission and the state wants them to. And the challenge there is you have to choose the right PIMs, you have to choose the right not only sort of metrics, but also incentive levels, and sort of balance between sort of these traditional maxims of customer service, reliability, and affordability, along with some of the emerging imperatives towards decarbonization, equity, and resilience. And it can be challenging to find the proper baseline or benchmarking data in this context. You might have to evolve from sort of first selecting the right metrics, and then maybe going to targets, and then maybe putting in true incentives. But the other option would be sort of, taking a Totex approach along with, appropriate performance-based outcome incentives. And so here you're really, eliminating the Capex bias, promoting cost containment, while at the same time focusing the utility and its revenue incentive or its ROR incentive on the outcomes that you care about. This is probably takes the most effort, but could potentially bear the most fruit in kind of achieving both sort of cost-effective solutions in the IT space that are also outcome focused. And I'll note, in New York, going back a slide, we established through reforming the energy vision, capitalization of cloud solutions, and a variety of different performance incentive mechanisms. But what's lacking there, much to my now chagrin, is the cost containment aspect. And I think the best example of the latter, sort of even better approach in our view, is what Hawaii has moved towards adopting or is in the process of implementing right now, and what Connecticut is looking at in terms of Totex for non-fuel and appropriate PIMs. So with that, that's sort of our presentation here, and we'd welcome any questions or discussion. I think we left a good 15 minutes for that.